So it's come to this. Hey guys, what's up? So before I get on with the video, just wanted to do a formal apology to all of you watching right now about the fact that I did not have a video out last month. I really did want to have a video last month. In fact, I wanted to have a whole lot of videos up this year. The list of stuff that I actually been planning to put up is just backing up. But the beginning of this year has not exactly been very kind to me. You already know in January that I got hit with COVID, and that took me a while to get over. And then after that, and keep in mind, this is all happening while I'm still going to work. Like, I work an average of 11 hours a day. It's a night shift, and I have an hour commute to and from work. So I usually have to recover from that, but I'm also recovering from, at the time I was recovering from COVID, and then I got hit with something else. And that took a while to finally clear up. And then I had maybe a couple of weeks where things were getting better, and then I got hit again. And then it's just like one stupid little sickness after another. But the latest one that hit me, which I'm only just now getting over, it was like some kind of weird flu, and it messed me up. Like, I actually had to take a couple of days off, and this has really cut into my recovery time, and just from work, because I'm having to recover from work and being sick. But it's also cut into the time that I wanted to spend making videos, editing videos, the cutting footage I have for the sword videos that I am still behind on. There's certain allocation swords I really want to do videos on because, oh my God, like some of these swords I really need to talk about. They're freaking awesome. But yeah, it's been one thing after another, but I was determined to make sure that I recorded this because I did not want to miss another month. So it's this one. And the reason why I began this video the way I did is because I'm kind of picking an easy topic. It's basically a list. One thing about YouTube is that people love making their list videos. Top 10 this is the best stuff. These are the best games for this. So I feel a little, I won't say ashamed, but slightly disappointed. But at the same time, I don't mind so much because this is actually a question that I've gotten a lot through PMs, underneath videos, and even certain QAs. I get asked this, and even though I've answered this in several different ways, I keep getting hit with it. So I thought that I would make this video as a sort of general, list of swords for people in certain situations. Like, this is a good sword for you if you are this. This is a good sword for you if you are that. In the hopes that the next time I get hit with this question, I can just link the video, and then maybe this video will fend off those questions for at least 6 months before I get asked again. Not that I'm faulting you guys for that. Just saying. So in this particular case, what I'm going to do is, and this is primarily for people practicing Chinese martial arts who are looking for swords to practice with or train with. This isn't necessarily for somebody who just simply wants a sword. If we could do another video, and I've done one like that already, but for those of you who are, I just want something to cut up in the backyard. My advice, really, really, really quick, just get something affordable and have fun with it and be safe, because as much as we love playing around with these things, they aren't toys. They will slice you up. They can do horrible, terrible, mean things to you because they're weapons. That's what they're designed to do. So yeah, if anybody just want to cut some stuff up, go ahead. But for those of you practicing Chinese martial arts and are looking for a weapon, this is for you. And it's just going to be a list of swords that I think are good for what you're doing. That being said, this is far from being a definitive list. I've handled a lot of swords. Not more than other people. I know some people who've handled way more than I have. Skallagrim comes to mind. I haven't handled nearly as many as he has, but I have handled a lot of swords. And over the course of time, I've come up with some opinions as to which ones I think are good for certain people. That being said, it's still a small amount compared to how many swords are out there and how many companies are making them. So I really am only able to recommend pieces from the ones that I've already handled. I don't feel comfortable saying, oh, that's a great sword, you should get that, when I've never used it, practiced with it, encountered it, swung it around. Like, I don't feel right recommending that. So there's going to be a lot of companies that I'm just not going to mention. Cold Steel, I've really only handled one or two of their pieces. Not enough for me to make a definitive thing of saying, get this, get that. There's a couple of other companies I can think of. I can't really say anything here or there. Like One Owl. I've heard really good things about them, but I got nothing to say. WLE, which is a general martial arts mart. Some of the swords that they're selling are swords I've sort of already handled, but not all of them, so I can't overall recommend. I will say one thing though. One company that's recently popped up is the Art of Iron and Fire. I think that's what the company's called. It's a new and up and coming company. I've never handled any of their pieces. I'm interested in a couple of them. I got to put the money together to try one or two of them. But Lao Shi, Scott Rodell, swears by these guys. Like, he's really enamored with the swords that they come out with, and I think he's even working with them to like have a couple of pieces here made, And considering that, when I've spoken to him about swords, I can tell you right now from the conversations I have with him, he is very, very, shall we say, discerning when it comes to the things he expects out of a Chinese sword. So considering how high, his requirements are, the fact that he's, pretty much giving them his seal of approval should mean something to some of you guys. That being said, I can't recommend them because I haven't used any of them. So the companies I'm pretty much going to be talking about as far as pieces to get is Hanwei, LK Chen, and JKOO/Sino-Sword. Those are the three companies in particular that I really can make some mention of, along with what I like to call the Lungchuan knockoffs, or I forgot the name of the company, their pieces that a lot of people keep copying. So with that being said, let's get on with it. I've wasted too much time in the intro. For those of you practicing Chinese martial arts who are looking for a Dian or a Dao to practice with, but you only just started, you haven't had much experience swinging them around, you haven't really started doing drills, you haven't learned any forms yet, my suggestion to you is don't get a lifesteal sword. You're not ready yet. I know. Lifesteal is so cool, and cut things up with it, and it's a real sword, and all that good stuff, but I just said earlier, they're weapons. They may not be weapons that are really used much anymore, but they are still weapons. And they can do really horrible things to you if you mess up with a swing. I think there's still some video footage out there of some people who found out the hard way what happens when you swing and miss and end up hitting one of your own body parts. It isn't fun. So until you have the coordination and the skill to be able to swing these things around without hitting yourself, stick with wooden swords. Stick with practice swords. Now, that being said, there are a couple of practice swords that I think are pretty decent. The ones that I like to call Lungchuan knockoffs. Those of you who practice Chinese martial arts, I'm pretty sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. I've spoken about this before when I talked about sword trends and their designs. There's that particular model that everyone who's been to a martial arts store in Chinatown has seen, especially in the older days. Those of you who've, some of you going to Kung Fu schools, you probably have several of these things up on the wall or in a rack somewhere. These, for as much as, these days we can turn our nose up at them like that's not a real sword. But you know what? They still are balanced pretty well. And more or less, they still got a decent weight. They at least handle a lot like the real thing. They're not going to cut through anything. And I certainly wouldn't use one to, like if I was in a sword fight, I'm not going to pick them. But, for what they're for, which is to practice, as long as you're not picking up one of those that's like whipping around like freaking, aluminum foil, you should be good to go. And for that, I'm going to also say that wushu, quote unquote, wushu steel swords, I don't recommend those at all, unless you are practicing contemporary wushu. And that's a whole other can of worms. If you, however, you're trying to learn traditional Chinese martial arts or you're trying to learn a weapon art and actually learn how to use a real weapon, those will do you. Now, if you don't want to get those, you want something a little bit higher quality or, supposedly higher quality, then I can recommend from Hanwei the Adam Sudzian or the Tai Chi Practical Sword. Hey, future me here, and I am stopping past me from giving you guys some misinformation. I was going to recommend the Adam Sujien and the Hanwei Practical Tai Chi Sword. However, I can't really do that for one of them because the Adam Sujien apparently is discontinued and they're no longer selling it. For some strange reason, I thought it was still on the market, but it's not, which is a shame because it was actually a pretty good practice sword in two particular ways. One, the blade shape made it so that if your edge alignment was correct, you'd hear that satisfying whooshing sound. And also the hand grip itself had grooves in it, which helped you to develop your edge alignment. The good news I can give, however, is that the Hanwei Practical Tai Chi Sword is still being sold. And it actually took some of the design elements of the Adam Sujien, namely the hand grip. It has those lines in there. The blade isn't designed exactly the same way, but you still get something of a decent sound if you got your edge alignment right anyway, so there you go. So yeah, if you want something else, look for the Hanwei Practical Tai Chi Sword, but unfortunately the Adam Sujien is no longer being made. I know, sucks. Now let's say you are a, oh, and by the way, those are for the Jian. For Dao, other than, I'd say, the Longchuan knockoffs, I don't really know of any practice Dao that Hanwei makes similar to those two. At least I've never handled one. I know about their practical Dao, but those are sharp, and I don't recommend those for beginners. So, sorry, it's either the Longchuan knockoffs or wooden swords as far as my own experience is concerned of the things I've handled. So, there's that. Now, if you do have some experience and you feel that you're ready to handle live steel, but you also aren't ready to spend a whole lot of money on them yet, which personally I don't think, you know, unless you've done this for a long time and you feel, nah, I can afford a really, like a family heirloom level sword. You're not there yet, and there's no reason to spend that level of money. You just want something that it's live steel, so you know, boost up your confidence that you'll be able to swing it around without hurting yourself, and or you also want to incorporate cutting practice, so now you need something with a sharp edge. There are two swords I can recommend, just like instantly. I don't even have to think about them. The cutting Jian from Sino Sword and the Scott Rodell cutting Jian from Hanwei. Either one of those two are great. If you don't, if you're on a budget, then the Sino Sword one I would recommend instantly. It's cheaper than the Scott Rodell one. Granted, because of that, there are going to be, you know, certain trade-offs. So one thing, I feel that the handle is a little too long. I know why they made it that long. It's to help with the balance. But that being said, I've handled other Jian that didn't need to make the handle that long in order for it to be properly balanced. So it's a bit of a concession. Also, there's the chance that, you know, hopefully you will not end up with, you know, bad quality control. Every now and then, it's not often, but every now and then I've seen something come out of Sino Sword that's a little problematic. Fittings might be loose, blade might be a little bit crooked, you know, things like that. But for the most part, most of the pieces that I've handled from that company have been made pretty well. And not only that, but you can also customize these pieces to an extent. In fact, they're really the only company I can think of, other than, say, maybe LK Chen, where you actually have some say in how the sword is going to be made. You can actually specify, you know, how you want the handguard to be shaped, what type of wood you want used on the fittings, maybe even change the length of the blade. Like, there's a lot of stuff you can do. But granted, if you're on a budget, you probably don't want to ask for too much, because the more customizing you want, the more money it's going to cost you. And considering that this Jian is, at the time of this recording, is $169 freaking dollars in this day and age, 2022, that's a no-brainer. It's sharp as all hell. The one I have is still in really good condition, still cuts well, still handles well. The fittings have not gotten loose or anything like that at all. Great piece for the money. I got no problem recommending it to people. Even people who don't practice Chinese martial arts, when they pick up that sword, they're like, wow, this is nice. And it's fairly no frills. It's just a monosteel spring steel blade, a real spring steel blade, made out of 9260 steel, which, by the way, is something that I think is excellent for Tien, especially beater swords like that, where it's not folded steel, so you don't, put a nice mirror polish on it. Sharp as all hell. Balance is great. Weight is great. Good practice overall weapon for, like, an intermediate student. Great. Now, if you want something a little bit higher up level, Scott Rodell one. In fact, that one I think is not only good for somebody who's ready to move on to live steel, it's just a good overall sword, period. I know I still owe you guys a review on that sword, and I do plan on doing that, but I guess consider this to be a little bit of a preview of the review, in the sense that I think it's a great sword. I happen to, I've signed up for Scott Rodell's online sword class just so I can keep my drills going. And that's usually the one that I'm using along with everybody else when we're doing our stuff. It's a great piece. Good balance, great fittings, the weight, the feel of the weapon. I love the grip, the handle, just the right size, just the right thickness. I got no complaints. The fittings are nice and tight. The wrap is nice and tight and looks great. I love the way the fittings look. I love the look of the high quality wood they use for the scabbard and the handguard. The only complaint I would have about it, and they're minor, it's just little, well, one's minor, the other is, one is the finish. The blade finish it's not a nice polish. I personally find it's a kind of like a weird satiny sort of polish, which is one that Hanwei's used before in some of their other pieces. It's not bad per se. It looks very utilitarian. Some people might be turned off by that. But then again, to be honest, if you are good at polishing your own pieces, there's no reason why you can't make the finish look better. Like just start, work, I guess, with started with 800 grit sandpaper and then move on to 1,000 and 2,000 and 5,000. Then you'll have a nice mirror polish similar to the Sino Sword one. I just think that the Hanwei one, that the Scott Rodell Cutting Tien is made to a bit of a higher standard of quality than the Sino Sword one. So, you see where the money went, but it is quite a bit more. You're going to be spending around close to $300 for that one, whereas the Sino Sword one is $169. Again, if you're on a budget, it should be obvious which one to go for, but if you want a piece that is very well made, great balance, and quite honestly is something that I can imagine somebody using well into their old age, Scott Rodell one. It's great, as long as you don't lose the Hanwei lottery, and it's the other complaint that I have. There's this weird thing with Hanwei. Every sword company, it seems, has quality control issues. But it's like each one has different issues. With the Sino Sword ones, the quality control issues you might have is maybe crooked fittings or a bad glue job or something. And again, these are rare, but I've seen it happen with some of their pieces before. You might have something rattling or something like that. But most important, they're tight. The Hanwei lottery is different. That one it's a gamble whether or not the live steel blade you got is going to be sharp or not. That's the thing you got to look out for. I've seen it so many times, a sword that was supposed to be sharp from Hanwei, and then we get it and we're examining it, and the thing is as dull as a butter knife. And I've even seen with double-edged swords, one side well sharp and the other side, what the hell? I can't explain it. It could happen to you. Again, it's not widespread. This isn't like a guarantee, but it's something to look out for when you're getting swords from them. Just saying. At least from my experience. So, I could pretty much end it right here, but we sort of have an elephant in the room. And what I mean by that is, what about LK Chen? I haven't mentioned any of their pieces at all. Oh, before I forget, for you doll users, Scott Rodell does have a practical cutting doll. I have not handled it yet, but a couple of people I know who have handled it said it's freaking awesome. So you might want to consider it. I do know that also Sino Sword does make doll that are also low priced, so you might want to check those out as well. So, yeah, I keep forgetting about you doll guys. There's more of you guys out there than there's gem guys, so, at least from what I've seen. But we got to talk about LK Chen. Now, I like their swords a lot, even with the quality control issues they sometimes have, which they've been getting way better at over the years. They've gotten a lot better at their quality control. at least from what I've seen and from what other people have told me. But the thing about LK Chen swords are that they're very specialized. It's not as like the typical person out there practicing Chinese weapon arts. They're working with, I hesitate to say contemporary swords. What I really mean is like they're using swords that are based on Ming and really Qing dynasty designs, Qing dynasty Republican era designs. That's where the martial arts that's where they pretty much stopped at their evolution when they were being used as practical fighting skills. And so the swords tend to reflect that time period. And everyone pretty much considers those measurements and those designs to be the quote-unquote standard. However, LK Chen, they make swords based on actual pieces from earlier time periods. And while they do have pieces from the Ming and later Qing and even Republican era dynasties, those tend to be higher priced replicas that are going to cost a little bit more money than the average student is going to be able or willing to spend, unless they're a more serious student that has some experience under their belt, to which case I would say you might want to check some of those pieces out. But that being said, I'm talking about the Qing and Ming and Republican era ones. Like the Snowy Peak, for instance, which is one of my personal favorites right now as far as a more contemporary looking Jian. It's quite a bit though. However, most of their swords, at least the ones that made them famous, made them well known, are the ones based on the Han Dynasty. And those swords are not what you would consider contemporary designs. The blades are a bit narrower and longer, even the one-handed ones. And the two-handed ones are freaking huge. So those particular swords are going to be for the student who is willing to, you know, they've gotten experience under their belt. They already know how their forms and their skills, and they're able to adjust those skills with those weapons. And they just want a more unique piece to practice with. I can recommend those for that. But for the average student, they're going to want to get swords that are closer to our time period, you know, Ming, Qing, Republican era ones. Like, again, the Gale Wind, the Snow Peak, the White Serpent, which I have not handled yet, but I know Skull has it, and I gotta ask him what he thinks of it. I think I might have a while ago, but I forgot. Those swords are closer to what you're used to practicing. Or Dao users, the Yanling Dao, which, by the way, is, if you guys, for those of you who practice with the Dao, who want one that's going to cost a little bit more money, you got more experience under your belt, you want a really nice piece that's really close to sword designs from the past, I cannot recommend the Yanling Dao enough. I need to do a proper review with that weapon, but here's another preview of it. That sword's awesome. Oh my God. That sword seriously made me want to start practicing Dao basics in earnest. That sword sings. Oh my God. That one I can recommend to a more experienced student. Everything about it, the fittings, the quality control, that beautiful freaking blade, how tight the wrap is. Wow. That's a beautiful freaking piece. I just, wow. That one, I can't say enough good things about it. So I can recommend that one. But again, it's a bit more higher priced, so not necessarily for the student on a budget and or the beginning student. But what about their other swords? Well, for somebody who's got some good skill, and this again for the Jian users, got some skill under their belt that wants to use something a little bit different than the norm, then I could recommend, for instance, a couple of my favorites. The Flying Phoenix, which I think is the backbone of the company. That sword is always awesome to me. Smaller handguard than normal, gotta warn you. Narrower blade, longer blade, but the balance on that thing is great. And it just flies through the air. It is so freaking lively. I still use the thing to practice with. I still think it's great. Another one you might want to consider. Now this one's going to be a weird recommendation. For those of you who practice Xingyi Chuan, and you want a sword to practice with that, I mean, any of the other ones that I've mentioned would be good, obviously. But one you might want to consider, and I know this is going to seem weird, but hear me out on this, okay? You might want to consider the Soaring Sky. That sword has grown on me over ever since I'd gotten it. It's a narrower blade than normal. It's certainly a long weapon. Like, this is a sword that can easily be used in two hands. But the thing about it is, it's beautifully balanced enough that you can use it with one, and it's sturdy as all hell. The reason why I'm thinking it might be something that a Shingi practitioner might want to consider is the gen forms that I see for Shingi, at least the traditional Shingi styles, are very brisk, very military looking. Like, they're just quick, brisk motions, and some of those motions can be done with either one or two hands. I've seen certain forms where the person will even sometimes grab the sword in two hands. Now, considering that the Soaring Sky has a handle long enough that can be gripped in two hands without much problem, and has a blade that is long but not too long, so you can use it with either one or two hands without much problem, and it's so sturdy. That's the one thing about that blade. It's very robust. Like, you know, for as narrow as it is, it's a nice, thick, strong weapon. It looks like it was made for brisk, strong motions. So, I mean, every time I've practiced with it, and I like practicing with it, I just get a nice solid feel from it, despite the fact that it's so elegant and thin looking. So, for that reason, I'm thinking, well, for those reasons, I'm thinking a Shingi student might like it, considering the rather brisk motions that they do with their gen forms. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm nuts. But any of you guys, if you're practicing Shingi Chuan, you tell me if you would like using a very sturdy, because that blade is not going to bend at all. It's just a nice, strong, solid block of sharpened steel, but it's nice and narrow and elegant looking. I really love that sword. And the more I handle it, the more I keep thinking, I could see one of those guys practicing with it. And maybe a Bagua student as well, because they tend to use, Bagua students, especially with their gen forms, their sword forms, period, they like using oversized freaking weapons. And while I wouldn't necessarily call this particular sword oversized, it's still pretty long for a one-handed one. So you might want to consider it. Now, if you'd rather have, no, I want a proper two-hander one from LK Chen, well, then either it's going to be the freaking Roaring Dragon or the Striking Eagle. And of the two, for the average student, you're going to want the Roaring Dragon. The Striking Eagle might be a little too much for you. It's a longer weapon, which means that if your body technique is not good, if you don't have strong stance work, if your leverage is off, that sword is going to let you know. I've mentioned it before. The Roaring Dragon is a bit easier to handle, so you might want to go for that. And even though the handle is longer than normal, it's not so long that your two-handed techniques are, it's made to be used in two hands. You'll do just fine. Those of you who are practicing two-handed gen technique, you know, again, maybe a Bagua student, Shingi student, even Mantis people, because I've noticed a lot of Mantis students have two-handed sword forms. Those swords will do you. I think they will work pretty well. So, and as far as the Dao goes, well, I've already mentioned the type of Dao that I think of. LK Chen, they got a whole lot of Dao. But out of all of those Dao, most of them aren't what I would consider contemporary ones. A lot of them are based on earlier pieces that are straight. So unless you're somebody who wants to mix your gen and Dao techniques together when you practice, I wouldn't recommend those. Like, if you're somebody who wants to like find a sword to mix those up, oh, then you got plenty, like their Tang Dao, their, you know, Song Dynasty Daos, you know, Sui Dynasty Dao. Those, you know, you might want to play around with those because they're straight. They're single-edged, but they're straight. Now, having said that, the two that make me go, oh, a modern student might really like messing around with those. One is the Youngling Dao, which, again, I can't sing enough praises for. The other, if you want something a bit more robust, something meaner, something that you know if you swing it at something, it's going to get cut. Got a nice heft to it, but not so much heft that it's going to tire you out. The Songhan Dao. That thing's a beast. It's another one that I really need to hurry up with a review for. The cutting I did with that when I was testing it out, it's insane. That's a sword. That's a chopper. That's a mean freaking chopper. That's one that I can see Dao lovers really liking. Now, again, it is straight, but it's wide and thick, and it's obviously a chopping sword. Okay, you're not doing gen techniques with this. Okay, this is made for those, you know, robust Dao type motions. So that's another one that I recommend. If you want a Dao that's really like, it is made to chop through things, yeah, that one. that one. Again, these LK Chen swords that I'm mentioning are a bit more higher priced. So this is going to be more for the more established student that's got a bit more money to spend for his craft. I don't necessarily recommend these for the beginning student or the student on a budget, but if you have the money to spend on these, I think they're worth it. So yeah, that's it. This video's gone on a bit longer than I expected it to, but I hope that you guys were able to get something out of it. And I am hoping down the line, as time goes on, if I have to do an update version of this, I'll have some more swords to mention for people. But these are the ones that these are the swords I've handled, and these are the ones I feel comfortable recommending for the, students who are looking for a weapon to practice with and train with. So hope you're able to get some good info on this. And if you guys happen to know of certain other companies or certain other swords that you think would be good for students, feel free to let the rest of us know, because we could use some, again, the Chinese sword market is not as large a market, is not as large a sword market as the Japanese one or the HEMA one. So any good news about good Chinese weapons at prices that we can afford is always welcome. So feel free to let the rest of us know. All right, that being said, gotta get this video out. Catch you guys later.